Please remember to keep your phones off and stay seated during our meeting. And now, please help me enthusiastically welcome our speaker, Patrick.
Hey, there you are. Hey, I'm Patrick. I'm an alcoholic. It's good to be here. It's good to see you, Mike. Thanks for asking me to share. This is a big honor. I'm going to light this little candle for our friends and family who we've lost because of alcoholism. So during this meeting, we'll kind of remember them because that's the reason we're here. It's really cool. My sobriety date is June 16th, 2004. That's not the cool part. It's just cool being here. I moved up here a few months ago, and I thought this was a really great opportunity for you guys to get to know me a little bit, get to know my story. I know that you guys have been amazing at reaching out, making me feel welcome. Part of the reason I moved to Prescott was because of the fellowship. Recovery is very important to me, and so that was one of the top three. So my sponsor's name's Cowboy Scott. You got to be sober a while to get a cool nickname like that. I will observe the fifth tradition, which is in case there's anybody here that only has an issue with alcohol, I want to be able to identify with them. I've heard some amazing speakers here. Powerful, funny, none of which you're going to hear tonight. So I'm wondering if I can break the ice with a joke. It's a clean joke. I'm not going to use much foul language tonight. Are you guys ready? Okay, so there's a sponsor and his sponsee, and they are shipwrecked on a deserted island. They were on their way to a conference or something. And as they're walking down the beach, the sponsee bumps something with his foot. He picks it up, rubs it. It's a lamp. Out pops a genie. And the genie says, "I will grant you each one wish." He looks at the sponsor and says, "What is your wish?" And the sponsor says, "Well, that's easy. I want to be home Thursday night at Rarely at my home group." Poof. He's home Thursday night at his home group. Nice and safe. Now the genie looks at the sponsee and says, "What is your wish?" And the sponsee says, "Oh my God, that could be anything. Could be money, could be power. This is tough. I wish my sponsor were here." Poof. That's right. So, what I'll tell you, that's good. My sponsor loves that one. It's tough. It's tough to speak and to share my story. It's not particularly. It's a true story, and it's an AA success story, and you guys are a big part of that. And so, as part of my story, it's important for me to identify with you as an alcoholic. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it was like, what brought me here. I'll tell you, I came from Glendale, born and raised in Glendale. My family owned a little dairy farm. I really had no issues. In fact, I struggle with the idea of not feeling comfortable in my own skin. What I do know is that when other young men were developing, learning to face challenges, for example, when my parents were divorced, I thought I was the only kid on the playground whose parents were divorced, and I felt isolated. I remember I was running, I was like jogging, I was like 14. I was wearing a Snoopy sweatshirt, and I saw my buddies playing basketball at the park, and I froze, and I turned around and I ran home because I just didn't have that confidence that young men and women seem to build facing challenges, victories, defeats, rejections, fears. I do remember, however, my brother brought home a couple tall boys of Budweiser, and it was like a Budweiser commercial. By the end of the night, we were hugging each other, telling each other we loved each other. We were crying. It was memorable. And interestingly enough, in the big book, I chased that feeling for 10 years, right? Alcoholism kept me a lot longer than I was willing to stay. It took me a lot further than I was willing to go, and it cost me a lot more than I had to give. It is a progressive illness. Sometimes I talk in like a very monotone. Somebody told me that after I spoke one time. They're like, "You're so monotone." So I'm going to switch it up today. That's why I brought the special effects. The pyrotechnics are later. So when other young men, I could see my life paralleling these young men. And while they were learning and showing up and developing those principles in early adolescence, alcohol was my solution. It put that fire out. It gave me that confidence, and it was that social lubricant that it talks about in the big book. I knew that, for example, I went to homecoming, probably dressed like this, but with Jack Daniels, and I never made it inside the dance, right? I ended up passing out in the car, and that was my first blackout. We become a product of our environment, okay? Just like I am today because of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've spent the majority of my adult life practicing the principles in the program, right? Being a product of my environment. So a lot of what you hear tonight is it's not original. It's the influence that men have had in my life and my ability to accept that and to execute that. What I will say is the appeal that addiction and alcoholism brings is what keeps so many of us out there for so long. I'll tell you that in the beginning it was awesome. Those desert parties were awesome. Watching guys fall in the fire. I used to go to Walgreens. They had those concrete benches in front of Walgreens. We would steal those on the way to the desert parties. So we'd have something to sit on, or pallets, whatever. It was good. And the environment started to change. My goals and aspirations started to meet my present circumstances, right? And I started to lose that vision and those goals because that environment isn't conducive for vision and ambition. And the character that other men were developing when I was, it's called, I was in a retrogressive groove, right? Because I failed to develop. Although I would not tell you that. Because like in the big book, or in the 12 and 12, it says, why all of this insistence that we have to hit bottom? Because only at that place was I willing to become honest. That confession of shortcomings and that leveling of pride, right? I put on that stage character. Some people talk about that chameleon. Like, I remember my brother, amazing football player. I'd come home and he'd have these, all the brothers and the football players, and I'd come home and I would fit right in. For a little while, I was a skinhead. For a while, I'd wear corduroy overalls with a Grateful Dead shirt. The problem was, it was a failure to launch. I was paralyzed. I had that kind of like that wishful thinking, and I would talk to you about all my great ideas, right? But I did not have the shoulders wide enough to be able to execute those plans. I mean, those are for men who I watched Danny McCluth grow, go to school, learn how to deal with rejection, success, failure. But me, I knew that whether it was 5 minutes from now or an hour from now, there was going to be a situation in my day that I didn't know how to handle, right? And so I would drink early to put that fire out. It never failed. Well, the problem is Danny went on, and so did a lot of the people that I watched. And I remember my brother was murdered by some acquaintances of mine because that's where alcoholism took me, right? I was a fraud, right? I wanted that lifestyle so bad, but I did not realize that it was as shallow as a puddle, right? It brings nothing but disappointment. I had gotten everything out of alcoholism and addiction that it had to offer, all of the entertainment, all of the everything that it had to give, I burned through it early, right? I don't know what draws me back. Probably the lack of character, right? The fact that I don't want to face the consequences of the choices that I had made. I didn't want to admit that I had failed to develop the character and the principles that a man needs to be successful. Nobody wants to admit that. That's why the 4th step is so hard. Sitting down with another man, taking suggestions and being willing to grow. Being willing today to do the things that others are not, so that tomorrow I can have the things that they cannot, and that's freedom. Man, I'm all fired up. I drank way too much caffeine. Woo! Good stuff. It was funny. I didn't know if this coat was going to fit me. I told my buddy, I'm like, don't sit in the front row. I might put your eye out with a button. You know what's funny is, I was getting older. Now, I got sober in my early 20s. But it's funny because the responsibilities in life don't stop with my failure to grow. I was a child with the responsibilities of a man, right? And I would play that role. I could play it real good until it was important. When my wife at the time said, I'm pregnant, the hair on my neck stood up. When she said, come to the hospital, we're having a baby, the hair on my neck stood up. I stopped and I drank on the way to the hospital because I could not show up. I cut both of my daughter's umbilical cords under the influence. That alcoholic life became the only normal one. I remember my wife and kids had left. I had burned that. I was that tornado roaring through the lives of other people. And I come up out of the cellar and I'm like, what's wrong? The wind stopped blowing. They foreclosed on my house. Now, I had the same job for 10 years. I had an education in horticulture, of all things. And I would hold on to these little golden nuggets and say, no, everything is okay. This house of cards, it's okay. But it was just a matter of time until that house of cards would come down. I did not have the emotional intelligence or the fortitude to be able to successfully shoulder the weight of adult responsibility. And stuff. Where's that Red Bull? More. I was going to say something brilliant, but I forgot. Everything in my head on the way over here, I don't know what I was going to say. So hopefully you can identify with those feelings that towards the end it was terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. I was owned by addiction. That King Denison, alcohol, being under the lash, I get it. I get that book. This book was written a long time ago. But at some point, I had to be willing. Pain is the greatest motivator. I hope you felt it enough, right? Because only at that place did I become willing to accept spiritual help. And so I was in a treatment center. My wife and my kids, they did not come back. I remember sitting on my couch looking out that window waiting for my wife and kids to come back, and I took this steak knife and I was cutting my wrists, and it felt so good to feel pain. I promised I wouldn't get emotional. That's not true. It's going to happen somewhere along the line. So I went to this treatment center. I had just before that, my group of friends, I was swimming in the pool, and I had told them that I was thinking about killing myself. And that's a pretty tough place to be. And I've been there in sobriety. You're going to hear about it. So in this treatment center, I was vulnerable. I had been beaten into a state of reasonableness, right? When a man told me, my sponsor, he'd come into this treatment center, he'd be wearing 3-piece suits with all of him and his friends. And he told me, he said, Patrick, just because you have daughters does not make you a father. You may be present, but you have no presence. Just because you have a job does not make you an employee. Just because you have a mom and dad does not make you a son. That takes time and courage, right? And those Disney values that I failed to develop. So in that treatment center, I sent my wife flowers. I begged her to take me back. And my sponsor, he always has the answer in the book. It says, Patrick, we need not have our family back to recover. Burn into the consciousness of every man we need only trust in God and clean house. And at that place, I could understand that. He said, Patrick, I don't think you need to see your girls for a while. Okay, what you need to do is you need to develop the character, become a pillar of a man, so when they need you, you'll be there, right? And you'll have the rocks to be a man, to be a dad. Oh, no, you don't get it. You don't get it. I got child support to pay. I got to get my feet on the ground. You don't get it. You don't understand the gravity of your situation. I was a victim of the idea that I could successfully manage my life if I just managed it well, right? Y'all waiting for me to have a stroke up here or something. Woo. And you know what's funny is that that character that I present, I'll say we, man. I ain't treatment. I use you, we. So my mom's, she got me this these new Converse, and so I was broken in treatment. I could not, I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Yet, before group, I'd go in there and I'd polish up my Converse and I'd walk in there and I'd put on that stage character, right? So when I got out of treatment, y'all can relate. So when I got out of treatment, it's humbling, right? It's humbling when I recognized that I was 20-something years old. I was 23 at the time. I had a criminal record. I was an absentee father. I was an incompetent employee. I was a deceitful son. And that's humbling. But I cannot fill a cup that's already full. Which means with that leveling of pride came the ability to recognize, okay, so here's the thing. I'm going to go over some of this. So that admitting I was powerless over alcohol, I had tried countless vain attempts to prove that I could drink like another person, like I could be a father like another person. In the book, in the first 4 chapters, Bill's story, being able to identify with changing things. I had tried I crossed the line. Once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. There was no lurking notion nor any reservation of any kind that I'd ever be able to drink like a normal person, right? And I remember my sponsor, when I'd that last bit of pride, he said, Patrick, there's going to come a time in the near future where you cannot bring into your memory with sufficient force the pain and suffering of a week or a month ago. You're without defense. And that's cutting my daughter's umbilical cord, watching my house of cards fall down, right? Being absolutely paralyzed, trying to, the hustle. So he said, Patrick, look into the eyes of a child and tell me there is not a power greater than you. And he said, in the big book it says, as soon as a man can say that he believes or that he's even willing to believe, we emphatically assure him that he's well on his way. It's been repeatedly proven among us that upon that simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure will be built. You don't have to have God. We don't have to paint a picture. You just have to have the willingness. And we know what brings on that willingness, right? Is that pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. That window is going to open just long enough, hopefully, for this program or for you to pick up that kit of spiritual tools. Do you dig? Are you guys with me? You guys with me? You guys want to hear another joke? All right. So there's this guy, Joe. He's an old timer. He wears a suit and tie to every meeting. And he's sitting out in front of the meeting, and God appears to him and says, Joe, I've got good news and bad news. And Joe says, well, all right, God, what's the good news? And God says, there are lots of good meetings in heaven, Joe. And Joe says, well, then what's the bad news? And Joe says, you're chairing tonight's meeting. All right. That's funny, man. All right, so the funny thing is the promises happen, okay? That obsession is lifted. You've already felt it. Maybe, it comes quickly. Alcohol is a subtle foe, right? So that defense that must come from a higher power, that third step, there's a couple different ways I look at that, okay? The big picture. If I'm going to turn my life and my will over to the care of God, I need to understand God's will. The big picture, all right? What's my purpose as a man? And then there's on a daily basis, what are the little things I need to do to turn my life and my will over to the care of God? I could not find my truck keys before I came here. It was hilarious. God, I turn it over to you, right? Third step prayer is fantastic. Big picture. Okay, so my sponsor, he asked me, he said, Patrick, what's your life sentence? And I said, no, man, my parents hired lawyers. And he said, no, Patrick, what kind of a man do you want to be? What is God's will for you? And I said, I don't know. At 2 years of sobriety, I came to my sponsor and I said, I need a reason to breathe, right? Because I still didn't have a relationship with my daughters. My wife did not take me back. I rode a women's mountain bike for 2 years. And that means that my knees were hitting the handlebars. And when you got a backpack on, your knees are hitting it's very uncomfortable. And so my sponsor, he said to me, the answer is in the book. I'm so indoctrinated, man. I drank the Kool-Aid here. This is a cult, man. If you look it up, it's true. It works, though. This is my favorite part. Okay, so I tell you what happened, what it is like, and what it is like today. This changes everything. What's your life sentence, right? What kind of a man do you want to be? What sort of things does that man do in his life? And what sort of principles are you going to live by? Because if you can't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. So in the book, it says, Patrick, your job now is to be at the place where you can be of maximum helpfulness to others. Never hesitate to go to the most sordid spot on earth on such an errand. Keeping on the firing line of life with these motives, and God will keep you unharmed. Right? So this is coming from a young man who I've never been good at anything, right? I've been I mean, when I played baseball, I played left out. I didn't have a moral compass. I didn't have a moral compass. Right? And the funny thing is I believe when my spine, I believe. That's funny. So when my sponsor, he said, put down on paper what sort of principles you're going to live by and the kind of life you're going to lead. Because I understand a lot of young men like myself leave treatment misguided, a lack of depth and weight, a lack of vision. Well, what I needed was a North Star. I needed a compass north. I needed a reason to breathe. If you need purpose, your dark past is the greatest possession you have. It is the key to life and happiness for others. With it, you can avert death and misery for them. Right? At some point, I had to decide whether I wanted to build character or choose comfort. In sobriety, did I want to be okay, well, my sponsor says this too. He says it's a sliding scale, okay, in sobriety. You can be a swinging dick douchebag. Or you can be a man of God. Now, what kind of man are you going to be? Are you going to compromise on that? Are you going to compromise on those values? I understand the need to feel validated as a young man in early sobriety. Be validated by other men. Be validated by the book. Be validated by a higher power. Right? So interestingly enough, when I read that, a couple little golden nuggets, I'll tell you. I mean, you don't even have to read this book. The steps won't save your life, right? All of this together applied in your life, it transforms lives, right? I mean, I'm about to prove it. So in 2005, I started volunteering with the Red Cross. H&I is a big part of my story, right? Giving back. I get that practical experience shows that nothing will so much ensure your sobriety as intensive work with another alcoholic. When you're going through a difficult time, when your wife won't take you back, it will work when all other activities fail. Because you can help when no one else can. This isn't about you. At some point, it has to switch, right? We begin to work on that altruistic plane, right? That that kindly act of being a good Samaritan every once in a while. That's not what I'm looking for. My sponsor says, you're either the tip of the spear or you're in the rear with the gear. So during this Red Cross Hurricane Katrina, they brought the refugees over, and I'd wipe down beds every night. That's a good way to build character, right? To humble yourself, to give of yourself so that others can survive and enjoy life. And when I was at the, ooh man, it's hot up in here. When I was doing that work, these firemen came down and they were reading a book to these kids, man. And I'm like, it looked very similar to that vision I had created of what kind of a man do I want to be and what sort of things does that man do in his life. So I came back to my house and I called my sponsor and I'm like, Scotty, I know what I want to do with my life. And he said, what? And I said, I'm gonna be a fireman. And he said, well, you better have a plan B. Right? I watered down my Red Bull. So I knew that I could not transmit something that I didn't have. I knew that I wanted to lead and I wanted to inspire. I wanted to help young men and restore them to their family like my sponsor did with me. Well, that's why H&I has been so big, going into institutions, prisons. I've been a fireman for 15 years now. One of my first big trips, in the book it says, it's time to fit yourself to be of maximum service to God and the people around you. So, I didn't come here to go to meetings every day, man. I wanted to have an adventure. I wanted to have a life worth living, a purpose-driven life, right? So, I became a paramedic. Education was very big to me. You do not understand the gravity of this situation. You have no idea how powerful recovery is going to be in your life. Your whole outlook upon life is going to change, and I promise the world's outlook upon you will change too. All right, but you have to be creative and you have to aim high. So I was working for the Peruvian government. I went to the Amazon for a month, and I was vaccinating the indigenous Indians in the Amazon. Brazil, Peru, Colombia, the Machigangue, very difficult. I've been to the Middle East. I worked in Syria, Egypt, Lebanon, Jordan. In the fire service, you got to understand that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me vision. Like, it is my compass north. That my purpose is to be at the place where I can be of maximum helpfulness to others, right? And I fit myself through education and the power of the program and empowering by men around me, sharing their stories. So I joined the urban search and rescue team like FEMA, and so I worked in Africa. I did infant rescues in the Congo and Tanzania. And at night I would come back and I would work in an orphanage. I spent time in India, and I'd go into the most sordid spots on earth, into the slums all over India. Man, I cannot tell you the stuff I caught. So 17 years of sobriety is really easy to let up on your spiritual program, right? There has to be a message of depth and weight. What is it going to take to secure your confidence? The promises? I mean, I was at a meeting last night. We talked about the promises, and then we talked about picking up 24-hour chips after that. Like, I get it. What is it going to take to put a hook in you? I know what it took for me, right, is I had to be willing to go to any length with the desperation of a drowning man. And I've seen what it looks like when a man drowns, right? There's no fingernails left, man. Claw at it. Like that life preserver being thrown out, like I'm throwing to you right now. What other cool stuff have I done? My daughters are amazing. I've taken them to South America. I can remember a couple years ago, I was trying to remember moments that remind me that my recovery life, right, has outweighed the consequences of the past, right? Like my sponsor's plan B was, the fact is if you want to build self-esteem, you need to do esteemable things. And eventually, enough of those things will outweigh the consequences of the past. The recovery is what you make of it, right? Like I learned how to play guitar. I love scented candles. I listen to classical music. I've traveled all over the world. I get into things like the Ironman triathlon. Savage, right? 142 miles. I'm telling you, But it was a milestone in my recovery. My daughters and I, we went to the Caribbean, and I remember the super clear water, and at the bottom, I saw the shadow. We were holding hands, and we were snorkeling on the top. They will fucking measure me up against any man they will ever meet. That's the kind of man I wanted to be. That's the kind of life I wanted to live. I remember with 3 years of sobriety, I remember this baby was delivered and it wasn't breathing, and my partner came up to me, and it was in a little ice cream bucket. Sorry if this makes a problem. And he brought this bucket up to me, and there was a baby in it. And I looked at my captain, and I said, what do I do? You know? And he said, breathe for it. You have any idea how it feels to be a man who was snatched from a life of frustration and despair and being given the power to save another man's life? That opportunity's been given to all of us. And so my sponsor, I got these at Safeway. Damien, you got your apple still? You didn't eat it, did you? All right, Zach, you got your apple? So my sponsor, he'd take an apple like this, and this is real. Look at that. Looks like a picture. And he said, Patrick, you can eat that apple today. It will sustain you, right? Or you can sacrifice it, and you can plant the seeds, and you can spend the rest of your life under the shade of those apple trees, and it will feed you for the rest of your life, right? And so in the book, and you're going to feel this, it says, what I have indulged in is spiritual intoxication. Like a gaunt prospector. Gaunt means starving, right? Emaciated, bones. Like a gaunt prospector, belt drawn in over his last ounce of food, my pick struck gold. Joy at a release of a lifetime of frustration. At first, I try to hug this treasure to myself. But I will find that, now I can't quote it. It says, if I mine it for the rest of my life and insist on giving away the entire product, right? I get that. I get it. I wish you could walk a mile in my shoes, right? God, I was going to say something else brilliant. Okay, there's another cool thing. So, you can eat that now, Damien. That's what the prop was for. I call that out. So what this talks about is I understand that relationship with my God, my director. I am his agent. I am his 007. I say that in the morning. I say, God, make me the tip of your spear. Show me what I can do to help people who suffer. That sounds funny, but it gives me a reason to breathe. I wake up with a giddy up, right? A little hitch in my step. And he said, Patrick, if you want to have an amazing relationship, you got to spend an incredible amount of time to be in love, right? That's the way it is with God. I've fallen short in every area of my life. But when God works differently for me, right? When I see a mountain, when I see a battle, he sees a victory, right? I solo climbed Kilimanjaro in Africa, but for the grace of God, right? But for the grace of AA. This is a program of recovery that cannot be finished and done with. It's a way of life. And the challenge contained in these principles is great enough to keep any human being striving for as long as he lives. We cannot outgrow this plan. Because as recovering alcoholics, we have to have a program for living that allows for limitless expansion. Others idle in that retrogressive groove without too much danger, but retrogression spells death for us. right? But I do become grateful for the necessity that makes me toe the line, putting one foot in front of the other. It's pretty amazing at my ability to face challenges today, right? To successfully shoulder the weight of this responsibility. This is what you've been waiting for. What did you think it was going to feel like? Right? This lifestyle that we want requires broad shoulders. And it requires a development of skills and character and values. You know what I'm saying? Give you a little bit of this too. How am I doing so far? Are you with me? Can I get an amen? Amen. It's funny. It's funny. So, I had this question. I was going to close with this question. And but I'm not going to close yet because I want you to hear something. I think you're going to like it. We become a product of our environment, right? You show me your friends and I'm going to show you your future. What kind of man do you want to be in sobriety? This is the kind of man who leads me. It says, says, I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it or fade it or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own. I want to know. This is a really amazing poem, and I'm paraphrasing it. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and stand on the edge of the lake and shout to the silver moon, yes. Doesn't interest me where you live or how much money you make. I want to know if you can get up night after night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. Doesn't interest me what or who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you can stand with me in the fire and not shrink. Doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. You know what I'm saying? Because it's about the man who's actually in the arena, who's doing the work. So I'm going to close with this. It's the invitation. I'll tell you, it's pretty amazing. So I'll close with this. Particularly is for the young man who may have bought into what he's heard tonight. And I'd ask him, how far are you willing to go? And what sacrifices are you prepared to make? What kind of a man do you want to be? And what sort of principles will you live by? And are you willing to give of yourself so that others can survive and enjoy life? All right. Now I want you to prove it. Okay, thank you.
All right, let's give our speaker another round of applause.